just so you know. Are we live? Welcome, everyone, to the City of Hendersonville's Finance Committee meeting for January 24th, 2023. I'd like to welcome all of our visitors today. And I'd like to note that we have committee members who are present. So can we go around the room and everybody tell who you are? I'm Karen Dixon. I'm Ward 4 and I'm the chairman of this committee.
Jeff Sassy, Ward 3.
Jana Garten, Ward 5, Vice Chair of the committee. Tamara Ingersoll, the Assistant Finance Director.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Jesse Eckenroth, Chief of Operations.
Andy Gilley, Parks Director.
Scotty Bush, Fire Department.
Julie Evans. You want?
He doesn't want to speak. He wants to.
Julie Evans. I'm with Craft CPAs.
Right.
And I'm Ken Youngstead with Craft CPAs.
Great. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Does anyone have any changes to the agenda that they'd like to make tonight? We'll just, then can I get an approval of the agenda? Can I get a motion? Second, so our agenda is approved. In regards to our meeting minutes, we have 2 meeting minutes that we need to approve from October 25th, which I understand I'm the only one here that was a committee member at that time. But I have looked over the minutes. They are accurate. And our November 29th meeting, which was really short, where we elected the chairman and vice chairman. So can I get an approval for both of those? We'll consent them. A motion. Second it. So those minutes are approved. So we'll get into our ordinances and resolutions. We have the reading of ordinance 2023-03 and ordinance amending our ordinance 2022-11 to reflect our mid-year adjustments to the city's 2023 fiscal budget year. And I will direct Mr. Eckenroth to please take us through this ordinance, if you will, or we can ask Jamie to do it since he just walked in, whatever you want to do.
Would you like to go through the mid-year budget or would you like me to? Why don't you do it? Okay. Yeah, so at the beginning of every fiscal year, we budget for the year. We do it rather conservatively. And traditionally we like to, take our revenues and budget conservatively. Beginning last year, we implemented a mid-year review where we went 6 months throughout the year, and then we said, okay, let's go ahead and look at revenues, how they're doing, actuals against projections, and do the same with expenditures. Because when we're preparing the budget, we're doing it 3-4 months before the fiscal year. So we're projecting out, sometimes 17-18 months ahead of time. If we start, as early back as 5 months before for revenue projection. So mid-year gives us a really good chance to say, hey, this is what we projected. We have 6 months of actuals, and then we can project forward the rest of the year on those. So we can really do a good job of truing up. So we took a look at revenues. We started this year with a projection of about 54 million for revenues. We went back through our revenues to check actuals and projection, and we're proposing approximately $3.4 million of additional revenue. That's primarily from sales tax. We'll have a sales tax update tonight.
Yes.
We have some other minor revenues that we updated. One that we actually reduced, but sales tax makes up approximately 3 million of the increase that we're showing. Business tax is another 100,000. And then there's some insurance reimbursements in there, and those just really net out to some extra expenses we're going to have related to insurance repair. So we're accounting for the insurance revenue and the expense.
I see Jana does not have a big copy that's readable. She's got the little copy in her book. Do you have another one of these, or can you guys share?
Yep.
I'm positive she can't read that little printout. Okay, I'm sorry to stop you. Go ahead. Thank
Sure.
you.
So on the revenue side, we have about 3.4 million, like I said. So when we take our beginning of year revenues, approximately 54, we added 3.4. What we're proposing is approximately 57,349,859 for revenues for fiscal year 23. And then on the expenditure side, what we really did is we asked the mayor, what are your priorities? Public safety, infrastructure. And so you will see the majority of what we're proposing for mid-year budgets is public safety. So between police vehicles, new fire engine, and then between the general fund and state street aid, we were able to identify another $1 million paving list that we're able to do through the mid amendment. Well, there's a lot of smaller amendments. We did account for the golf cart barn. So our golf cart barn, we recently had a structural analysis of that, and the engineer basically put us on notice that needs to be replaced. So that's included in here as well.
And that's like 400,000, right? I'm looking for it. They're 350. Okay.
Yeah, so and that is budgeted between some general fund transfers and also from just this general fund category up top too. So we're in addition to adding some expenditures as new items, we're also taking some expenditures that we have that we know we're not going to spend, and we're just transferring accounts so that it's not a net difference. It's going to be the same bottom line, but we're just going to transfer money between accounts. So this third little section where it says general fund transfers and expenses, where there's zero net expenses and use of fund balance. That's just where we said, hey, are we really going to utilize all these expense accounts that we have to their full potential? And if not, can we shift them around without asking for additional funds? It's just a shift of where those funds are going to be spent at. So in total, we added on the operating side about 2.8 million in expenditures. And so that got our operating budget. We started the year in the red at 614,000 for our operating budget. And with the additional revenues and expenses, it gets our operating budget in the black, $5,000. So much healthier position than when we started the year. And it accounts for the golf cart barn, additional paving, police vehicles, and a fire engine. So much better position. We're very pleased with what we're able to do and the revenue collections we've had this year.
You forgot to say that it'll increase our reserve balance. Or did you say?
Yeah. 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 So I mean, we're positive, $619,000 more
Yeah.
after this mid-year amendment than when we started the year. So it's always a little, I guess, I'm a little nervous when a budget gets approved in the red like this, but we do budget conservatively. So we're able to true up. And I still think this budget's a little bit conservative, and it's still showing a positive surplus for the general fund operating budget. So on the non-operating budget, this is going to be our capital and our special projects. Expenditures of 515,000. Of that, 101,000 is use of fund balance. So those non-operating are called out here. That is the golf cart barn, special projects, lights at Memorial Park. So between those projects, 505,000, I think they're 515,000. So this year we started in the non-operating side with a very high surplus. We had one-time ARPA funds coming in, and then some reserve funding balance that we were using. So even with the addition of the cart barn and lights at Memorial Park, that non-operating budget is still positive, almost $300,000. So on page 11, it kind of combines everything. And if you look at the very bottom, you can see when we began the year, the original budget had a total surplus of $91,000. And after all the amendments, revenues and expenses, we're proposing almost a $300,000 surplus. And then we're balanced in both the operating and non-operating budget and meeting public safety and infrastructure needs throughout the city. So, we weren't able to do everything that was requested. We're not adding any new positions.
Right.
With the mid-year budget. The mayor just had some pretty strict criteria that were in the black in every single category, which we were able to accomplish. And then obviously kind of hit those key elements for the city. So I think from staff's perspective, we're very pleased with what we're able to do. And then I think from a fiscally accountable perspective, we're in a much better shape than when we originally started the year.
Okay. This is going to, we're going to have a special call finance meeting next week,
Sixth.
the 6th. So is that next week or is it week after that? Next week,
It's 2 weeks.
2 weeks, okay.
Yeah.
So we'll get a chance to really dig into this with BOMA at that time. And can I ask, what were positions that were asked for? I don't necessarily agree with adding them, but I want to know what they were.
Yeah, so we had police, fire and parks had all asked for additional positions. We weren't able to do it and keep the operating budget in the black, so we were able to do these things and keep it in the black, but those 3 departments had asked for additional personnel.
And we have, when we go through the budget setting process, we have a process to add employees. That's, you know, that is very comprehensive. And so I just felt like we weren't at the point that we could do that, because you got to look at what the pay is, you got to look at what the reclassifications could possibly be, you have to look at the benefits, you have to look at what it means to Social Security, you have to look at what it means to insurance, all of those things.
And that's what we'll do this summer for the
Yeah,
next year's budget.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then if I point out one more thing, the focus of our attention will always be on the general fund. These special revenue funds like our drug fund, our stormwater fund, and our state street aid are basically, we get revenues in, they're pretty set, pretty routine. We're going to spend 100% or at least up to 100, thereabouts for those specially designated purposes. And so one of the things that we noticed this year as we have stormwater funding, we're able to dedicate staff to just do stormwater funding, and we can do it outside of the right of way. So those, there was 3 positions that used to be drawn, their salaries were pulled from state street aid. But now that we've reorganized those positions and they work in and outside of the right of way and they're completely dedicated to stormwater, we're charging them against the stormwater fund, which means we have less expenditures in the state street aid. So that's where we're using more money from state street aid to do paving and less for salaries and benefits. So we're basically just tracking our employees with where they're doing their work and designating the funds that are appropriate for those employees and charging against those funds.
Great. I'm very happy with what I see. I think it's a good position to be in here at the beginning, in mid-year. Very happy that we're adding the 10 additional patrol cars. I think we need to do that. We can have a conversation about our fire engine number 6, our pumper truck, but we can do that in 2 weeks with all of them if you want to. Do you guys have any questions?
Yeah, so Jamie, will then 10 new police cars, will that retire 10 police cars, or will that just add to the fleet?
It will replace 10 vehicles.
Okay, what do we do with those when they're retired?
I think we auction them off. They'll go to auction, so we'll get some residual.
Yeah,
They're pretty old.
We don't trash them, but yeah, they've been
There's a couple totaled ones too.
driven. Yeah.
and how many patrol cars do we have in total, do you know?
I don't.
It's about a 3/4 of a mile long. I know
Yeah,
that much.
I can. I don't know the total. I have it on one of my emails, so I probably before the end of the meeting, I'll see if I can pull it up.
Right,
It's a lot.
thank you.
Do you have anything to then generally, and this is my 3rd year voting on a budget, or I would like to propose that make a motion that we pass this on to BOMA and discuss this at the special call meeting on February 6th. Okay, we'll do that. And so our next,
Yeah, all in favor.
all in favor, I'm sorry. Aye.
Chairman asked me to help them out, so.
Thank you. Thank you. We get back to the minutes. So our next ordinance on the agenda, you're welcome, is reading of resolution. It's a resolution for 2023-04, a resolution to adopt an investment policy for the city of Hendersonville. And again, that's under tab 2. I will turn this over to Mr. Ethan Roth. I have reviewed it and I will let him bring the group up where we are on it. All right, I can find my copy.
All right, so starting on page 14, the city's in a much better financial position, especially from a cash standpoint than it was years ago. So one of the revenue sources that we should have is interest income. We don't have a lot of interest income. I think in the past, as cash balances were kind of low. It didn't make sense to pursue an investment policy when you really don't have cash to invest. We're in a different position now. The city, I think, is going, as it continues to grow, it's going to have more available cash. So we should leverage the opportunity of our cash and earn interest, earnings interest on those funds. We don't currently have an investment policy, so this is really the mechanism that we would put in place to then put our money into the market to earn return, so we can have some interest income. So we can add a line item to our revenue bucket on the go forward that says interest earnings, and whatever that amount is, we can have every year. So we're just looking for ways where we can be leverage our funds and be as efficient as possible. There are pretty strict guidelines on how investments are done in the state of Tennessee. So maturities can have to be 4 years or less for any type of debt or instrument that you go out and you get in the market, unless you get approval. So I think for us starting out, what we'd probably primarily do is put our funds in a liquid pool. So the Tennessee state has a local government investment pool, I think LGIP, and the return right now is, I think, are over 3%.
That's
So, and it's very liquid. So at that rate, even going out into the bond market doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you can dump 10 or 15 million into a very liquid account where you get over 3% on. So this is under MTAS review, but I didn't want to wait for them to be finished with it, because every week we're not investing our money, we're losing out on what we could be earning. So they may have some amendments that they make to this policy, but I did not want to stall the process to wait for MTAS to finish the review.
right. So Janet and Jeff, this is the page that really sums up what we're trying to do in terms of, it's right before page 26 in my book, where it shows where we are liquid in near term, short term, and medium term for 4 years. So do you?
So Chrissy, I do not have that in my book that I can find, at least.
Oh, you may not.
That's that now.
Thank you very much.
So the policy is basically a copy of GFOA, has sample policies. It's basically a carbon copy with some things that carved out a little special for our city. But there's just in the back of it is all the forms in that maturity schedule, which is basically dictated by the TCA on which types of investments and maturity length on them. So pretty straightforward. I think what we'd probably do is initially, as we get the program up, we'd probably internally say, hey, it makes a lot of sense just to put it in the pool where we get over 3%. We don't really have to do any management. We don't have to hire an outside firm to come in and manage it, because the rate of return is so high right now in there. In a year or two, if that rate drops and we have more funds and it makes more sense to bring an investor in, I think that's definitely something we should look at. But since TCA regulates so tightly on what we can invest in, and the pool is so high right now, we would really like to just be able to put our money, at least in that pool, to start earning 3%. I think we earn a few basis points right now in our savings account, so we don't earn much money. So I definitely want to bring this to BOMA after MTAS reviews it, see if there's any adjustments.
And so you asked them to review this back in November, and they still haven't gotten back to us.
I gave the purchasing policy to them in November. I gave this to them more recently. I did get an email from them that this is one of the next ones on their list.
Good.
But it is almost a carbon copy of the GFOA's recommended investment policy. So I don't see that there's going to be substantial changes to it.
I'm very happy. This is something we've been talking about for almost 2 years, right? And thank you for your work on this. I really appreciate it. It's being smart with our money, and we finally have a general fund that's hefty enough that it will work in our favor. So I think that's great. Thank you. Do you guys have any questions?
It's a variable rate, is that correct?
So there's different instruments that we can invest with. If we go with the local government investment pool, that's just market dictated. So like last year it was 20 basis points or 5 basis points. It was like that. And now it's over 3%. So it's 300 plus basis points. So yeah, that will change based on the market. The TCA does allow us to go up to 4-year maturity. So there's some different notes and T-bills that we could do. And if that pool you know, if the variable rate gets really low, I think then we go out into the bond market and say, okay, can we do better in the bond market?
Okay,
Now
so
that-
nothing locks us in for the full 4 years. We can withdraw from it.
Well, you know, you can buy and sell bonds. You know, you have maturity dates. You take a risk of losing on a bond. If bond rates go up and you bought a bond at a lower rate, you're going to sell at a discount. But there's nothing that precludes you, I think, from selling a bond. So the important part of that schedule, the maturity schedule, is that we're always rotating maturity so that we don't have all of our money out 4 years. So some of that maturity has a threshold, so it dictates that we have to have, hey, at least half of our unassigned fund balance in a liquid pool. And then the further you go out, the less that we can invest. What I'm recommending is the less we invest in those long-term maturities, so we always have cash flow. Now, it does make sense for some capital projects we know are going to come and they're going to take 3 or 4 years. It makes sense to say, hey, let's get our highest return.
Mhm.
And if that's a 4-year maturity, whatever instrument that is, let's go ahead and get the highest rate of return, because we know that project's not going to pay out until 3-4 years from now. And then it will roll off and it'll mature at the time when we need the cash.
Okay.
Great.
Can I have this?
Yeah, so they were put in all the finance committee's packets, and I'll make sure you get a full one.
Well, I would like to make a motion that we move this on to BOMA and wait on NTAS. Move it to BOMA.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Great. Thank you, Jesse. That's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we're under other agenda items, and we can ask our visitors to take us through. You want us to reference this package?
Yes. Yes, we've got 2 things that we'll cover today. First, just a quick introduction. I'm Ken Youngstead with Craft CPAs, here with Julie Evans. Julie's been involved with your audit for a number of years, longer than I have, actually. But you know, we have 2 things we'll cover. One is a report to the mayor and board of aldermen. And this just has some required communications with people who are involved in a governance role. If you don't have a copy of that, there's copies right here. Julie's got some there as well. And then Julie's going to cover a few brief highlights of the financial statements. I know the copies of the financial statements may be sitting in your spots but really the intention of this is to answer any questions that you have, be available to you to respond to anything that you'd like to know about the audit process and the results for this year. And if there are detailed questions, we do have some copies of the audits here that you're welcome to take a look at as well. So I'm going to start with our required communications. And if you flip a few pages into page 1, you know, we have a contract with the city of Hendersonville, but we also have a contract with the comptroller's office as well in Tennessee. So it's like a 3-way contract that outlines our responsibilities as auditors and the city's responsibility and those charged with governance. And so if you want to see a copy of that letter, we're glad to provide that. There was also a communication that we sent early on that went over the planned scope and timing of the audit and identifies, you know, some risks of material misstatement that we kind of plan into our audits, things like management override of controls and proper timing of revenue recognition, things like that, but pretty standard on that front. In terms of policies and procedures, accounting policies and procedures, you know, we did adopt 1 new accounting policy this year required by GAS and the GASB related to leases, but you all don't have material leases where it had any notable impact on your financial statements. So obviously a very easy implementation of that standard, but it does apply to the city. So anything else new or significant that was adopted this year. You flip over to the next page, we'll go over a few of these points. We don't have anything significant or unusual where there's a lack of authoritative guidance that we ran into this year that we need to share with you all. We'll talk about accounting estimates here in just a moment and adjustments to the original trial balance. One item on uncorrected misstatements that was really a reversal of the prior year. You know, those are things that we might identify during the audit that we don't actually adjust on the, you know, on the books because they're immaterial or for other reasons. And so this was a minor item related to, you know, last year. It doesn't have an impact on your ending fund balance for this year. So, but otherwise, we didn't have any disagreements, other consultations that we're aware of that you've had with other auditors, you know, to for instance, get a second opinion, things like that. But we really didn't have other difficulties that we need to report to you. So we appreciate the efforts that your team put into working with our team to be able to get us issued on time and with a good, clean report. So happy to report that. If you flip over to the next page, these are the most significant estimates that you have in your financial statements. They include depreciation for long-lived assets, in your so obviously that those span over a course of time. You have a pension liability, an asset or liability. Your pension plan is with TCRS, and so they have a series of reports that are available to us to use in the course of your audit, and they're based on discount rates and assumptions, that are based on life expectancies and a number of different things. And so that is actually a pretty notable estimate that's in your financial statements. Julie can point that out in the financials when we go over it. And also post-employment benefits, your OPEB plan. You've got a separately sponsored OPEB plan where there's also discount rates and assumptions, things like that are used for any post-employment benefits that are provided. So the questions there. Flipping over to the audit adjustments. Actually, there's a page full of information, but actually your financials are pretty clean. We always go through a series of adjustments, and yes, it is small. Sorry.
Glasses off to see.
But Julie may want to provide some color commentary here, but we make some adjustments for things like encumbrances and things like that to convert your statements, your fund statements to entity-wide statements, things like that.
And the largest ones that were made this year, there was an accrual for the second tranche of the ARPA funding was about 2.9 million that was recorded in the books for fiscal year 22. And then more of a true up with when the new property tax assessments came out. So property taxes receivable and the deferred revenue related to that are really the biggest things.
Yeah.
There's some miscellaneous payables, accruals and things like that. But once you knock those first two out, then the rest of them really don't net to much. So,
Okay, great,
Right.
so really in
Yeah.
good shape when we started. So
great.
Great. And then the attachment that you'll see to this is the representation letter that we have, the city signed as we're releasing the audit. We issue the audit December 22nd. And, so we have this available for you to look at, but Jesse and the mayor and Robert all signed the representation letter as we're wrapping up
Great.
the audit.
Jesse, do you have anything I know that there was no disagreement, but did we, have any hiccups that weren't explainable or, are we okay?
No, I thought actually the audit was, it was clean, unmodified, right? That's what you want to see. And then our cash balance went up. So I think internal controls means internal controls are doing pretty good. And from a cash perspective, we're doing well.
Yeah.
So it
No
was,
finding on that. That's great.
Right.
it was very favorable, I think. And so I was very pleased with the report.
Great.
So Julie, do you want to go over just
I'll
a
just
couple of
touch on a few
observations,
things
just
and
maybe very
once you-
high level?
once you all
yeah.
get in there and get a copy of this is 109 pages of information. So it's very, yes, 5 minutes. You got a clean opinion on your financial
Yeah.
statements, unmodified opinion. There is a report in the back that relates to compliance with government auditing standards. So that's your financial reporting and internal controls. If there was anything we became aware of, we would have a finding related to that. There's nothing to report to you all for that. And then also the very back report deals with report on federal awards. So because you get federal awards in excess of $750,000, you're required to undergo a single audit. And so there's a process we go through to determine your major program or programs, and then we specifically audit those revenues and expenses for compliance related to what the federal government's rules are with those. And so that was ARPA this year. And so that was predominantly all salaries and things. So those were easy to test and easy to document the records and things like that. So we didn't have anything to report to you all for that either. As far as I know, we've mentioned a couple of times, we've typically gotten asked in BOMA about fund balance and where the fund balance is. And so just to reiterate kind of what Jesse said, your fund balance has increased significantly over particularly the last 2 years. related to what we usually look at is your unassigned general fund balance. So things that aren't restricted or committed, anything like that. So at the end of this year, you had $20 million in unassigned fund balance. So if you look at that in relation to your budget for a year, that's a little over 5 months worth of expenses you could cover with that unassigned fund balance.
So
If you went back to last year, that was about $11 million.
Yes.
And then 2 years ago, it was about $4 million. So over the last 2-3 years, the unassigned fund balance number has really increased.
So Jesse, is
that,
that
so-
where the funds are gonna come from for the investment product that we've been talking, that we were talking about? Is that where it comes from?
Yeah, it can also come from other areas too, so it can, so unassigned is just like,
What's left
It's not
after
committed
you
anymore.
it's a
committed.
residual, but if we have funds that are set aside for projects, like we've designated in our budget, so they would be assigned to a project. But if a project is 2 years out, we could still invest those
Sure.
funds. So we could potentially have more than 20 million that we could put towards interest earnings.
Okay.
That's great.
So really at the end, and I don't have last year's numbers to compare, but the government as a whole, excluding the golf course, had about $38 million at the end of the year. So I can't really
Is that
say where that
excluding
was
the golf
last year.
course? Okay.
That's excluding the golf course.
Because
The
then
golf
yeah.
course just had about $300,000. So in the grand scheme of the city as a whole, it's not
Do,
too
do,
significant.
do we get a score?
Thank you.
Do you score us on this at all? Is
We
there-
don't
That's a good question.
score. I mean,
It's
we've
like
done
pass
some
fail, basically.
benchmarking kind of
Yeah.
things. I mean,
Okay.
as far as your financial statements go, it's either you are fairly stated in accordance with GAAP or you're not, or you've got a certain area that isn't. And so, but as far as like somebody like a GFOA or an MTAS, or I think the state is actually headed towards kind of with this uniform chart of accounts, trying to see where people rank
Okay,
in
great.
relation to each other, but overall, I think 3 or 4 years ago, when we did some sort of benchmarking, you were pretty low in the fund balance category. And
Yes.
so now you're considerably better shape in that
Yes.
area, but people look at like your borrowing
Mhm, right,
to your fund balance and things like that also, just to see what you can cover,
great,
but no official score.
okay. Do you guys have any questions? Crap.
No, that's great.
Okay, great. So in the BOMA meeting, we typically present an abbreviated version of what we talked about here. I know this was fairly brief as well, but we'll be pretty quick in there. But if you think there's anything that you'd like the other
We will chime in. Yeah.
folks to hear more about,
Yeah.
and of course, we'll open it up to questions for them
Great.
too. But
Thank you so much. Well, we'll move on to, and is Tamara gonna lead us in this discussion? Hotel motel?
Sure. You want to talk about sales tax or hotel motel first?
Let's do sales tax first.
So sales tax
Might as well.
on here is, it's updated through the November receipts. They come in a month later, so the December receipts will come in probably Monday of next week is my guess. So we don't have the December numbers on here. We are projecting higher than budget. Like Jesse mentioned, that's where a considerable amount of the increased revenue for the mid-year budget is coming from the projected increase in the sales tax revenue for the year. And we're looking, roughly $2.2 million at the projection over budget at this point in time. As the year goes on, obviously that will adjust over time. But we're looking really good in our sales tax revenue right now.
It is a good place to be.
It is a really
Hope it
good place.
continues.
It really is a good place to be. So I don't know if you guys have any questions on that. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, I think.
Nope, I'm doing the happy dance on that one. You guys have any questions? So you say you should wrap December up in the next week or so?
Yeah, the December for the sales tax revenue, the local sales tax revenue, they come in the end of the month for the prior month.
Oh, okay.
So like November's came in on December 28th. So we're expecting, the December one to come in I'm gonna guess either Friday or Monday.
Great.
So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Hotel motel.
Hotel motel. This one is actually, we are a little bit above our target, or compared to last year on this. A good portion of that actually has to do with the most recent month of December, which again, that December is not complete. We do the December collections in January, so we have a few more days, but those trickle in throughout the month. But we had a very large payment that came in just today for like $12,000 for one hotel that was
Wow.
back payment for several months. So
I mean, it still looks good.
so the December, it's showing a little bit high, but if you go back a couple of months back to October, that month was really low.
Yeah.
So I think they're catching up for whatever reason
Yeah.
at this point now. But we're trending a little bit higher than we were prior year, which is how the budget was based. So this is also looking good. I think we're getting post-COVID time. People are starting to travel again. I think as we go into, spring and into summer, this should continue the same trend, I would think.
Yes, and we have 2 hotels being built now. Or more. Do we have more than 2? I know there's 2 being built. So
That's good news.
we're
for-
taking
for
on
this.
Nashville tourism. It's fine.
People that want just a little bit out of the city, and
Yeah,
we'll take it.
okay, thank you so much. You guys got any questions? Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
And I second it. All in favor?